Good evening, Africa and the world. You're watching The Bold African Voice, where truth meets perspective and Africa's story is told by Africans. I'm Ami Callan.
And I'm Malik Johnson. Tonight we dive into a power struggle that's shaking up the continent's diplomatic heartbeat: guns, God, and geopolitics. How the U.S.-China tug-of-war over Nigeria could redefine Africa's sovereignty.
From Washington to Beijing, everyone seems to have a plan for Africa, but whose plan truly puts Africans first? We're unpacking what's behind China's open support for Nigeria's government and why the U.S. is threatening military intervention.
Exactly, Ami. And beyond the headlines, we're asking, is this really about human rights or about who holds the remote control of Africa's future?
Malik, that's a loaded question, literally and politically. Stay with us, because we'll also explore how faith, oil, and foreign influence are shaping this showdown, and what it all means for Africa's sovereignty in the 21st century.
You're watching The Bold African Voice, BAV, where Africa speaks for itself.
Welcome to the Bold African Dialogue, where we dive in deep on global power plays and, Nigeria's current crossroads in the international arena. Today's discussion spins around how Nigeria's sovereignty is being tested, not only by internal challenges, but by big power gambits from the U.S., China, and the EU.
Right. It's a fascinating intersection of domestic issues and external pressures. What really strikes me is the audacity of the threat. The U.S. warning of, guns a-blazing military action if Nigeria doesn't stop the supposed persecution of Christians. It sounds almost cinematic, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's, like something out of a thriller movie, but behind this dramatic rhetoric, there's a complex web of geopolitical maneuvering. The U.S. is using the narrative of religious freedom not only to spotlight human rights, but also to shift negotiations and alliances in their favor.
Right. And when you factor in Nigeria's internal realities, the violence isn't simply about religion. It, involves resource competition, insurgencies like Boko Haram, and farmer-herder conflicts. It's a multifaceted profile, much like a kaleidoscope of problems.
Exactly, and that is where Nigeria's response gets even more interesting. President Tinubu, for instance, rejects the label of being a magnet for religious intolerance. His government emphasizes that the narrative doesn't really match the on-the-ground realities where multiple factors are at play.
I mean, it's almost ironic. The U.S. thrives on oversimplified narratives like Christian persecution to justify drastic measures, while the actual dynamics are much more, layered. Would it be fair to say that this is a classic case of external moralizing missing the internal complexities?
Yes, exactly. And while the feds threaten aid cuts and potential military action, we see strategic countermoves from other global players. China, for example, quickly steps in with a strong defense of Nigeria, framing its stance as both principled and, economically pragmatic given their impressive investments in mining and infrastructure.
That juxtaposition is definitely eye-opening. China's backing isn't just about principle. It's also about dollars and, strategic footholds. And then there's the EU, which takes a more measured approach by reiterating Nigeria's sovereignty while calling for balanced dialogue. It's like watching a geopolitical chess match.
You could say that. There's this underlying tension. The U.S., using religious freedom as a lever, is trying to interfere, while China and the EU emphasize non-interference and respecting internal affairs. And Nigeria, well, it has to juggle these external spins while managing its own internal challenges.
Absolutely. And don't forget the financial angle. It's not all just high-stakes diplomacy. Amid these threats, Nigeria managed to launch a $2.25 billion Eurobond issuance. This move, with those high interest rates, signals that, despite the political drama, Nigeria is continuing to operate in global debt markets.
Right. And that move is particularly telling. It shows Nigeria's resolve in maintaining its economic autonomy despite reputational shocks. In a way, it's a strong message. We're still sovereign. We'll keep borrowing, and we'll, handle our fiscal matters on our own terms. Even amidst the turbulence,
However, one point that I think needs a bit of further reflection is the notion that the U.S. threat might actually force Nigeria to reform. Isn't it possible that such external pressure could lead to defensive posturing rather than genuine change?
That's a great challenge to the idea. While, some argue that external threats can catalyze, internal reforms by provoking public outcry, the reality is that Nigeria's issues, deep-rooted insecurity, governance deficits, and institutional weaknesses require long-term commitment. Quick fixes touted by external pressures might actually backfire if not managed properly.
Exactly. And that credibility gap is key here. Nigeria must tackle these problems head-on, rather than shifting the blame externally. It's, not enough to just repudiate a label of religious intolerance. It demands transparent data and serious reform measures.
And it's interesting how the narrative, particularly on social media, simplifies things into a binary. Christian genocide becomes the headline, while the nuanced truth, like the roles of poverty, regional disparities, and, non-sectarian violence, gets lost.
Yeah.
And that drives home the point. Control over the narrative is crucial.
Totally. It reminds me of that analogy. Imagine, losing an argument on Twitter. You might have all the stats and facts, but if the sensational meme wins, the truth is overshadowed. It's like the louder voice always wins in the storytelling arena.
Right. And Nigeria is caught in this digital age pressure, where hashtags and viral clips shape international opinion. That's why Nigeria's best counter-strategy might be to own its narrative with hard data, a move towards transparency that can undercut those oversimplified portrayals.
And then there's the broader African context. Across Africa, similar dynamics play out. Countries like Mali, Kenya, and Ethiopia also wrestle with internal conflicts while external powers try to, dictate the terms. It's a recurring pattern of, external moralizing versus local agency.
Indeed, and that sets up a much larger question. Can African nations, especially the larger ones like Nigeria, shift from being the chess pieces to, the chess players in global geopolitics? The
Right.
key is strengthening domestic institutions and ensuring that sovereignty isn't sacrificed at the altar of external interests.
What's compelling here is Nigeria's balancing act. On one side, you've got imminent pressure from external forces, military threats from the U.S., and moral posturing from various quarters. On the other, the need to continue reforms internally, like improving security and tightening governance.
Absolutely. And let's not gloss over the strategic choices Nigeria is now facing. They must decide whether to engage selectively with the U.S. for technical support while rejecting heavy-handed interventions, or pivot more towards other partners like China or the EU, which might offer alternatives that don't come with the same strings attached.
While that sounds strategic, I feel there's also an inherent risk here. The danger is, if Nigeria leans too heavily on one partner, like China, it might start compromising its own autonomy. It's a delicate line, wouldn't you agree?
Totally. And that's where the idea of balanced partnerships comes in. Nigeria must, leverage its relationships while safeguarding its policy prerogatives. It's like managing a portfolio. You need diversification to avoid overdependence on one investment, or in this case, one bilateral relationship.
And then the EU's role becomes interesting. It acts almost like the calm mediator, emphasizing dialogue and a commitment to peace building rather than the aggressive threat posture seen from elsewhere. It's like they're saying, let's talk this out rather than let aggressive military options dictate outcomes.
Right. And that stance, though softer, might actually be more sustainable in the long run. Soft power, combined with measured diplomacy, can sometimes, yield better governance outcomes than hard power threats, which risk destabilization.
We should also consider the economic ripple effects. The bond market reaction, for instance, is a clear indicator. Investors are watching Nigeria very closely. High interest rates reflect a premium on risk, and any further geopolitical turbulence could impact Nigeria's borrowing costs significantly.
Yes, that's a significant point. It shows that domestic credibility, especially in terms of governance and reform, isn't just a moral or political issue, it has very real economic consequences. If Nigeria can boost transparency and maintain internal stability, it can mitigate that risk premium.
And here comes the humor-laced reality check. While diplomats and generals debate policy over at the international level, the people of Nigeria are still, dealing with everyday realities, violence on the streets, economic pressures, and the challenges of rebuilding trust in state institutions.
Right, and that's why it's so crucial for Nigeria, and Africa as a whole, to address the underlying issues. It's not enough to just counter external narratives. They have to, focus on building robust systems of governance, community policing, economic development, and really demonstrate through data that they're doing something concrete.
Now, one contentious area is the use of the religious freedom narrative. While it provides a convenient external justification for intervention, it oversimplifies the actual drivers of violence, which, as you pointed out, are more about resource competition, state weakness, and deep-seated institutional gaps.
Exactly, and I'd argue that this oversimplification, if left unchecked, can become, well, a self-fulfilling prophecy, forcing Nigerian leaders to focus on optics over outcomes. It's a risky distraction from the real work of, strengthening governance and accountability.
Yeah.
That's a real concern.
It makes me wonder whether Nigeria might, in response, push back by aggressively publishing data, disaggregating violence statistics, offering transparent insights, the whole 9 yards. That could be a powerful counter to the otherwise sensational narrative being framed externally.
That's a sharp observation. Owning your narrative with hard facts is the best defense. And let's not forget the cultural aspect. Nigeria has a rich history of resilience. There's even a humorous counterstance circulating. Guns a-blazing? We're Nigerian. We've weathered coups and conflicts too. It speaks to an indomitable spirit.
Indeed, and while humor can sometimes dilute the gravity, in this case, it also reinforces a message of self-reliance and pride. But it's a double-edged sword because, if leaders rely solely on slogans without substantive reform, the credibility gap might widen even further.
Right you are. It's a balancing act between inspiring confidence and actually delivering on reforms. Nigeria must, walk the tightrope of asserting sovereignty while actively pursuing the hard work of internal reform. That means improvements in security apparatus, rule of law, and broad-based economic growth.
And as African nations look on, Nigeria's response might well set the tone for the wider continent. A strong, transparent, and balanced approach could encourage similar strategies across West Africa and beyond, shifting the paradigm from external moralizing to internal accountability.
Absolutely. And that's the crux of the debate. How can Nigeria turn this moment of external pressure into an opportunity for internal transformation? It's about rewriting the narrative from one of vulnerability to one of resilience and self-determination.
It really raises the stakes for the future of African geopolitics. If Nigeria can successfully navigate these choppy waters, it could serve as a beacon, demonstrating that African nations can, define their own terms without being tossed around by external narratives.
Exactly. And that's a lesson not only for Nigeria, but for the whole continent. It's a call to all African leaders. Own the narrative, invest in real reforms, and ensure that sovereignty remains non-negotiable. The future of Africa depends on it.
So, as we wrap up, the takeaway here is clear. Nigeria's current crisis is not just about military threats or moral posturing. It's about a fundamental struggle for identity, autonomy, and the kind of governance that truly protects its citizens. It's, a defining moment for both Nigeria and Africa at large.
Absolutely. And while the drama of international politics might grab headlines, the real story is unfolding in Nigeria's streets, its financial markets, and its institutions. If Nigeria can turn these challenges into a catalyst for genuine change, then, perhaps we're witnessing the birth of a new era for African sovereignty.
Well put. Thanks for this engaging chat. It's been a roller coaster of insights, challenges, and yes, a bit of that signature humor too. It leaves us wondering, what will be the next move on this grand chessboard?
That's the question. Until next time, let's keep our eyes peeled on these developments and, cheer on a future where African nations write their own stories, bold, intelligent, and without apology. So, whether it's God, guns, or geopolitics, one thing is clear: Africa's voice can't be ignored. It's time we shape our own destiny.
And the world is watching. But as we like to say here, we're not just being watched, we're being heard.
Join the conversation. What do you think about the U.S.-China rivalry playing out in Nigeria? Drop your thoughts in the comments section below.
And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to The Bold African Voice on YouTube. Together, we amplify Africa's perspective.